Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by green fields and golden hills, there was a boy named Leo. Since he was very young, Leo was known for one thing only: his laziness. While the other boys helped their families, picked fruit, or fed the animals, Leo preferred to lie under the shade of the trees, watching the clouds go by. He would say the sun was too strong, that the work was too boring, or that he simply didn't feel like it. His father, a humble farmer, woke up every day before dawn to tend to his land. He dug the earth with his hands, sowed seeds with care, and faced the heat without complaint. He repeatedly tried to convince Leo that work brings dignity and that effort builds the future. But the boy would only smile and reply, "Why work so hard if everything grows back on its own anyway?" The village people pointed him out. Some mocked him, others simply sighed with pity. "A wasted talent," some elders would mutter. Because indeed, Leo had something special, a clever mind, capable of finding unexpected solutions. But he didn't see it. He thought life should be easy and effortless, like a long dream from which he never wanted to wake up. And so the days passed, with his father working alone and Leo sleeping without guilt. Until one day something happened, something that would shake Leo's quiet and lazy life forever. But Leo, although averse to physical labor, was not entirely useless. Within his apparent laziness, he hid a spark of ingenuity that few noticed. For example, when his father asked him to scare away the birds devouring the newly planted seeds, Leo never went running after them like the others. Instead, he invented a system of scarecrows connected by ropes. From the shade of a tree, barely moving a finger, he would pull a string and make the figures wave, causing the birds to flee, all without standing up. When he was asked to carry water from the well, he built small ramps with gutters made of bamboo. He let gravity do the work. His exhausted father didn't know whether to scold him or admire him. Leo didn't move much, but things got done. Somehow, the neighbors saw him with critical eyes. "He's just lazy," they said. "He'll never amount to anything." But Leo didn't listen. He smiled confidently, thinking his way of doing things was better. "Why sweat if I can think?" he told himself. Even so, deep in his soul, there was a void, because while he avoided work, he also avoided growth. His ingenuity was like a seed that no one watered, and while he believed he was winning, he was actually falling behind. But all of that was about to change. Very soon, life would put him to the test, and there would be no rope or gutter to save him from the challenge ahead. One morning, the sun had not yet fully risen when Leo heard an unusual noise in the house. His father, who always woke up before everyone else, had not gone out. Leo, curious and a bit unsettled by the silence, went to the room and found him hunched over in bed, his forehead burning and his breath heavy. For the first time, his father could not work. The village doctor arrived later. After examining him calmly, he declared in a serious voice, he must rest for at least a month. No exertion at all. Leo felt a chill. He had never imagined that his father, his rock, could fall like this. The fields could not wait. The seeds needed to be sown. The irrigation had to be done every day, and weeds were already starting to invade the furrows. The neighbors offered help at first, but they all had their own fields to care for. Little by little, all eyes turned to Leo. "It's your time," said an old woman. "Your father needs you." Leo tried. He put on the straw hat, grabbed the hoe, and after an hour, he gave up. The heat suffocated him, his hands ached, and he had no idea what to do. He tried to use his tricks, but nothing worked in a real field with hard soil and delicate plants. In a few days, the leaves began to wither, the birds returned, and the pests came too. Leo watched the disaster grow, and for the first time, he felt a weight in his chest that wasn't laziness. It was responsibility. Every morning upon waking, Leo went out and looked at the parched furrows, the fallen plants, and the fruit rotting before it could ripen. The field that once flourished under his father's hands now looked like a plant cemetery, and he was the only one to blame. The neighbors no longer offered help, and they didn't bother hiding their words either. What did they expect from him? Some said. That boy has never been good for anything, others whispered. Every comment hurt him more than the heat of the sun or the weight of the hoe. And worst of all, his father, from his bed, tried not to show sadness, but his eyes. Oh, his eyes spoke of contained disappointment. One afternoon, while pulling weeds without conviction, Leo sat in the middle of the field and covered his face with his hands. Tears came without asking permission. For the first time in his life, he deeply wished not to be lazy. Not for others, but for himself, because he wanted to be useful. He wanted to give back to his father everything he had given him. He wanted to look at the field and feel proud, but he also felt it was too late, that he had already failed. Night fell, and Leo remained in the field under the stars, his hands full of dirt and his heart full of doubts. Then, in the silence, he swore something. If he ever had an opportunity to prove his worth, he would grab it, with no more excuses and no more shortcuts. He just needed a chance, and that chance did not take long to arrive. At dawn the next day, while Leo walked dejectedly through the village market, he heard the cry of a royal messenger that made him look up. Attention, inhabitants! The king has announced a grand competition open to all citizens. The winner will receive a chest of gold and the title of Inventor of the Kingdom. 3 challenges, 1 crown. People crowded around to hear the details. Leo, still dirty from the soil and with wrinkled clothes, approached cautiously. His heart beat fast. Inventor, gold. A competition of ingenuity. That didn't sound like brute force, but like strategy. The mind, the only thing in which he believed he had an advantage. But when he said out loud that he planned to participate, the laughter came quickly. A lazy sleeper going to compete for the king's gold. Others burst into laughter, and one shouted, "Don't fall asleep in the middle of the challenge." Leo swallowed hard, endured the mockery, and didn't respond. Something inside him burned. It wasn't anger, it was determination. For the first time, he didn't want to prove anything to others. He only wanted to prove to himself that he could be more than a lazy boy with good ideas. He returned home with his eyes lit up. His father looked at him from the bed, and Leo, with a firm voice, said, "I'm going to compete, Dad, and this time I won't fail." The day of the first test arrived with a clear sky and tense air. Dozens of participants, strong and determined, lined up in front of an enormous lake that reflected the sun like a mirror. The challenge was, of course, to cross the lake and reach the other side as quickly as possible. There were no boats, only the water, the nerves, and creativity. Leo watched the lake with a mix of anxiety and determination. He had never learned to swim. His heart beat like a drum inside his chest. He saw the others stretching, warming up their muscles, and throwing themselves into the water with force. Splashes flew. The strokes were firm. Instead, he stood on the shore, motionless, with his eyes closed and his hands in thought. While the others fought against the waves, Leo disappeared into some nearby bushes. No one understood what he was doing. Some even pointed and laughed. But 15 minutes later, Leo emerged carrying an improvised raft made of dry logs, ropes, and his belt. Carefully, he pushed it into the water and climbed on. Using a long branch as an oar, he began to cross slowly. He wasn't the fastest, nor the most elegant. But while some grew tired and others drifted off course or sank from exhaustion, Leo moved steadily. And in the end, when he touched the other shore, he was the third to arrive. The judges looked at him in awe. The crowd went silent. The lazy boy had made it, and not through strength, but through ingenuity. The final test was announced the next day, and with it came a new murmur of expectation. This time, the participants were taken to a wide esplanade where enormous blocks of solid wood, heavy as boulders, rested. The challenge was simple in words, but brutal in execution. Move the block from one end of the field to the finish line. There were no rules. You just had to make it get there however you could. The strongest competitors started immediately. They pushed with their shoulders, with their legs. They shouted and they huffed. Sweat poured from their foreheads. Some managed to move their blocks just a few feet. Others barely made them tremble. Leo stood in front of his block, observing. He didn't touch it. He walked around it, crouched down, tapped it gently, and measured it with his eyes. While the others exhausted themselves in brute force, he sought a different angle. Then, as if a spark had illuminated him, he smiled, took out his knife, and began to carve. For an hour, no one understood what he was doing, but slowly his block began to lose its corners, taking on a curved round shape, a wooden sphere.
The spectators watched him in silence. When he finished, Leo took a deep breath, placed both hands on it and pushed. The sphere rolled. He didn't need strength, only momentum. It moved smoothly along the natural slope of the ground, crossing the finish line before the astonished eyes of everyone. Silence, then applause, then cheers. Leo, the lazy boy, had won, not with muscles, but with his mind. That night, while the sky lit up with fireworks in honor of the winner, Leo didn't think about the chest of gold he had just received, nor the shouts of the crowd, nor even the king who had congratulated him with a proud smile. He thought of his father. At the following dawn, without announcing his arrival, Leo returned to the field. His father, still weak but already standing, saw him from the door with eyes full of emotion. Leo didn't say a word. He just approached, hugged him tightly, and then went straight to the barn. Since that day, something had changed in him. He no longer hid under the trees to sleep. He woke up before the sun, organized tools, fixed fences, and irrigated with care. But he hadn't abandoned his ingenuity. He used his intelligence to improve every process in the field, designing irrigation systems, natural traps against pests, and tools that eased the labor. With his prize money, he bought fruit tree saplings and hired some neighbors to help him plant hundreds of them. In a few years, the land flourished like never before. Orange trees, mango trees, apple trees. The farm became the largest fruit supplier in the entire region. But beyond the success, what had truly germinated was something inside him. His purpose, his desire to grow, his will to be better. Laziness no longer had space in his life. Now every day brought with it a reason to move forward. Over the years, Leo's name ceased to be linked to laziness. Now, when people mentioned him at the market or fairs, they did so with respect and admiration. The young man who transformed his destiny, they would say, the one who turned softness into strength. But Leo never let himself be carried away by pride. He always remembered the days when he didn't want to move a finger, the afternoons when his father worked alone while he slept without guilt, and above all, he remembered that moment in the field when all was lost and he cried among the dry furrows. That was his true awakening. Often the young people of the village sought him out for advice. Some were as he had been, dreamers but unmotivated. They wanted better but without the effort. Leo listened to them with patience and then told them his story. He told them that laziness is not a destiny, but a symptom of someone who hasn't found their purpose yet. You don't need to be the strongest, he would say. You only need to know why you want to get up every morning. The rest you build step by step. Leo never went back to being lazy, not because he forced himself, but because he understood that his talent was not a luxury, but a responsibility. When you find a reason to live, even the sleeping soul awakens. And so the boy who didn't want to work became the man who inspired everyone to never give up. Because sometimes the deepest change is born from the greatest mistake. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect, don't leave without leaving your mark. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this one, full of inspiration and teachings for the soul. Leave us a comment, telling us what part of the story impacted you the most, or if you've ever felt like Leo. Your experience might motivate others. And don't forget to watch the next video that will appear on the screen. It might be exactly what you need to hear today. Thank you for being here. See you soon.